It's taken me 6 months, but I've finally done it. I finally got rid of doors. Only for a week, mind, but we'll take what we can get.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and...
Not the other one. A slightly different flavour this week then. Bob's not here, but I have got a very special guest co-host with me this week, Mr. Jay Stringer. Hello, Jay.
Hello world. Thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Can you do Bob's voice, perhaps, just to make us, feel that things haven't changed, or...
I was worrying because, I've listened to the show and you two have both got very good radio voices and Bob's a proper actor. And I was thinking, I'm coming on with whatever this voice is, this kind of weird Midlands Scottish hybrid thing.
Authenticity is what it is.
Let's go with that. I'm taking that as a blurb.
But Bob will be back next week, he said, just having a little break. But I'm not. We're not actually on holiday together in our Speedos on the beach. So I still have to work, even though he's off enjoying himself. How about that? But it's probably colder where he is, I'm thinking. I don't know what it's like for you. You're based in Glasgow, Jay. I mean, it's probably still pretty warm, I'm guessing. It's really not the weather for doing podcasts, is it?
We've had 3 months of pretty much tropical weather. A friend sent me a message after about a month of 25, 26 degree weather, just saying, we live in a hot country now. We just need to accept that. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's we've been asking for this for years, I suppose, haven't we? Been jetting off on our holidays every year. We wanted it to be like Spain and be like Greece, and now we're realising we're just not set up for it. Not with our brown...
Too much, too soon. I'm not ready for this heat. I'm not built for it.
Well, brown brick houses don't help. I mean, half of mine is cladded white, but it's still pretty warm.
Yeah, none of our houses really are built for heat. I live in Glasgow. Our houses are built to retain as much heat as possible for as long as possible. With communal areas to burn people if needed to keep warm.
Well, I've noticed on Facebook, there's people in America and Australia saying, why are all these Brits complaining about the heat? We have it 40 degrees every day, all the way through the year here. The thing is, in the UK, air conditioning does not exist. Once it gets above about 20, and the inside of your home therefore gets above about 30, we don't have aircon. It just doesn't happen. There are no houses that have aircon built into them. There are hotels or public buildings sometimes, but other than that, we're just not set up for it. No,
absolutely. And we've really noticed it this summer. But yeah, I've got friends over from America at the moment. A friend who grew up in California on the Mexican border, and so he's very used to heat and dry heat. He's built for it. But even he got to the UK about a month ago, I think, maybe 2 months ago, and the first thing he noticed was that we just don't have air conditioning. So it feels different even to him. That we're all. It's like, why are you guys baking yourselves? What's going on?
Well, that's the thing. It's the dry heat that you mentioned. That's everywhere else in the world. You go on holiday to Greece, it's dry heat. Whereas here, it's humidity. We're on an island. It's just so humid the whole time. And they say that adds about 10 degrees. It's 30 here at the moment. So with the humidity, that's going to feel like 40.
Yeah, it's horrible. I'm not that good with heat in general. I went to Arizona a few years ago for a convention, Phoenix in Arizona, which I really enjoyed the city. But to get there, you fly. It feels like you're flying over desert for hours. So that it's kind of desert in all directions. Once you're in Phoenix, all you've got is hours and hours of desert. And I remember talking to people who lived there, and I was trying to say, how did this happen? How did you get a city in the middle of a desert?
Why not just build it closer to the edge?
Yeah, at the edge of a desert, I understand, because you get to the edge and you look out and you go, no, I'm not going any further than this. But how do you get to the middle of a desert and have a city?
Why did they carry on with all their tools? Why would they not just kind of just do it at the edge? That would have made much more sense.
Yeah, you'd think they were committed at that point to wandering desert. Just wander a little bit more and keep going and get to where there isn't desert.
Well, there we go. Not for us to tell them, I suppose. Shall we talk about some crime fiction?
Yeah, I suppose.
I was having a browse through the news this morning. I found something that I thought you in particular might find particularly interesting. It was in the Irish Times, so read into that what you will. But it says why Irish crime fiction is in murderously good health. Apparently, this is a new thing which is shaping the world of crime fiction. It's Irish crime fiction. And to kind of summarise and paraphrase what the article says, it's the fact that Irish crime fiction isn't really a genre. It tends to kind of broach different ones, and the same kind of tropes aren't there, and that readers are left guessing what's going on. I mean, I know you've got a bit of insight into this, haven't you?
Well, it's interesting that it's catching on in a way. It's always kind of been the thing that's about to break. You know, certainly I know a number of very, very, very fine, very great Irish writers. Does the article specify anyone?
It talks about Brian McGilloway, who I think is a mutual friend, who's a fantastic Northern Irish writer. It does mention some others. I'm just having to flick through here to try and find them. Steve Kavanagh was mentioned. I remember that.
Yeah.
Liz Nugent, Tana French, Arlene Hunt.
It is covering quite a diverse list there.
I think that's the thing. Irish crime fiction is very diverse. It's not a thing like Scandi noir. It's a very kind of specific thing, and the Scandinavian crime writers do that. But Irish crime is, I suppose, like British crime. It's not an actual thing in itself.
I think it reflects as well, that Ireland itself has a lot of different cultural influences, I guess you could say. I mean, the first Irish crime writer that really came to my attention, in modern day, I mean, I could go on a whole thing about Sean O'Casey and the influence Sean O'Casey had on me and how brilliant he was, but I don't think people think of him as a crime writer because he was a playwright, even though he was totally a crime writer. But Ken Bruin, about 15, 16 years ago, was writing a PI in Galway, and it was fascinating watching him try and mesh the American PI tradition with the Irish setting, and he kind of and the way he kind of found it was that because culturally Ireland didn't like snitches, didn't like people who were telling on other people, and so there was a delicate and really interesting delicate balancing act of how do you have a PI in a world, in a setting that doesn't want people telling on each other. And that was fascinating. But then, you've got Steve Kavanagh from Northern Ireland, and he writes a protagonist in America.
Yeah.
But obviously it speaks to the author's Irish, so it speaks to the difference there, that he's writing a very amoral character, but kind of almost a legal thriller, but a mystery character as well, and a con man. A wonderful mix of stuff going on there. So yeah, it's a really diverse list that they've got.
While we're talking about characters of mixed morals and characters of mixed heritage, go on, give yourself a plug. Tell us about your books while you're here as a guest host. It's a nice way of segueing into that, isn't it?
I suppose we should. My first three books were, because I guess that's where the real segue is, with this mixed up character idea. My first three books were about a Romany or half Romany character called Owen Miller in the Black Country in the Midlands where I grew up. And he's kind of a private detective, but for the criminals. If you're a mob boss who's had someone run away, or if you're a drug dealer who's lost a stash or something like that, you go to Owen Miller, because the thing that always confused me about PI fiction to an extent is that good people already have somewhere to go. If you're innocent, in theory, the modern world sometimes questions that, but if you're innocent, you go to the police. So who would go to a PI? And I thought it'd be the people who can't go to the police. And then, you make him, he was an ethnic minority, to kind of do something different and do something interesting. And reflect what I saw in the Midlands at the time, a very troubled area beneath the surface, a lot of mixed emotions. And I tried to reflect that in a character, and making him effectively half gypsy was the way to do that. I felt, because it's still a group that aren't talked about. It's still it's a way to have the ultimate outsider character at the same time as actually try and raise some social issues and to say to people, this group of people need to be listened to as well.
You do all of that with aplomb, and I love the books, as I've told you many times before. And one of the things that I particularly like is the style that they're written in. They kind of go back to this kind of gumshoe style, the kind of the Dashiell Hammett style of American writers back in the day, but set in Wolverhampton.
Yes,
it's a bizarre mix, but one that works so well, and I really like that. You can kind of see him there, kind of almost chewing on a cocktail stick at a street corner with his hat at a rakish angle. It's that that's the smoke kind of billows past his feet. It's got all of those feels, but in an area that's familiar. It's not the streets of New York, or it's the West Midlands. It kind of links those two worlds together in a way that I never would have imagined, because it sounds like it's just come out of a random word generator, but it really works.
Well, you actually hit on what the original book, Old Gold, the first book. I wrote it by accident. I wasn't writing a book. And what happened? Well, I'd been a film student. I didn't finish the course because I got in an argument with my tutor and left, which is that I never do that ever. I don't get in arguments. But I wanted to make a short film that was deliberately using crime fiction tropes, but set in Wolverhampton. And I was thinking, we'll have the voiceover, but it will be in a local accent. We'll lean into the tropes, but then we'll put a twist on them. But I didn't know if I could make that work. So I sat down to start writing a short story, thinking I'll test out the concept. And then, 60,000 words later, I thought, this isn't a short story. And it's not a film. So it became a book. But it did initially grow out of that idea of thinking, can I put these two different things together and make it work? And on top of that, then, you have to find a character that's interesting. You have to find a reason to keep the book going and to have things to say. But there was an element of, trying to combine my American influences with where I was living at the time, and see if it could work, see if it made sense.
Well, the novels are great. I think everyone should go out and buy them. But enough about you. We spoke before we went on air about Harrogate, where you were last week, and I've also been reading in the news, because I've been doing a lot of reading in the news today. Stav Sherez has won the 2018 Theakston Old Peculier Award for crime fiction for his novel The Intrusions. Is this one you've read?
I haven't read the book yet. I have it. Oddly enough, I've seen him talk about it a bunch of times. I've been to events where he's talked about it. Yeah. So it feels like I know the book better than I do because I haven't read it. But but Stav's a lovely guy, and it was. It's great to see him get success and get recognition. He's been one of those guys he's an ever present on the scene. He's at Harrogate every year. He's always got interesting things to say. He's got, this is going to sound weird, but he's ambitious in his writing. He brings that to his work, and it was just lovely to see him get the success, because it's earned, it's well earned, it's well deserved. But sometimes you turn up to these things and you kind of think who's going to win. You think, oh well, you look at a short list and think, well, we can see who's there to be the cool name, and we can see who's there to actually win. But to have Stav win was fantastic. I think the whole festival actually was pretty chilled out this year. I think conventions and festivals, there'll be a mood at them every year, and the mood kind of reflects, consciously or subconsciously, what's going on in the community, or how healthy we think it is, or how unhealthy we think it is. There have been a couple of times.
Certainly healthy. It's certainly healthy at the moment. I mean, crime fiction now is we'll move on to this in a moment. I'll let you come back. But it's the biggest selling genre now. It's up 20% on last year. Oh
wow! I didn't know the numbers on that. But it was chilled out this year. It was no one seemed to be stressed. No one seemed to be worried. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. And I think. Stav winning, it either set the tone for the weekend, because the ceremonies on the first day. It either set the tone for that, or it it helped just reflect the fact that I think we're all feeling pretty comfortable at the moment, pretty well adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, the Spectator here commented about Harrogate, and they mentioned that crime fiction is now the most popular genre in the UK. I think we covered that on the show a few weeks back. But even though book sales in general are falling, in 2017, for the first time, crime fiction outsold general and literary fiction, garnering 18.7 million sales. I think only 17 million of those were Peter James. And that's up 19% from the previous year. So between 2016 and 2017, there was an extra 19%, an extra fifth on top.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's getting on for 4 or 5 million extra crime fiction books sold, which is extraordinary. Yeah. That's a book for every 10 people in this country, almost.
That's fantastic. I wonder why I'm not getting
and that's just
sales.
Extras. Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't noticed mine going up by 20%. I think I must be missing something there. But, I mean, does it reflect, so we're getting, dark here, but you were talking about Harrogate, and this is why I wanted to move on to this, about the tone of the festival being set by who wins what and who does things, and what the kind of the headlines are in the industry. Do you think maybe the popularity of crime with the general public has something to do with things that are going on at the moment? Because, let's face it, the world is going to hell in a handcart. So does crime give you that nice ending where the bad guys get caught and that things are okay in the end? Is that one of the reasons why we like these kind of these stories that resolve? Is that reflective of what's going on in the world at the moment, and the fact that people are kind of, especially in this country, they're arguing against each other over Brexit, over this, that and the other. There's class divides. It's morale as a country is probably lower than it's been in a long time, save for the England team getting to the semi-finals of the World Cup, which perked us all up a little bit.
I think you're absolutely right. It's tricky ground sometimes to talk about crime reflecting society, because we can get a bit lofty sometimes, and also I think writers use it as an excuse. I think writers can sometimes use our, they go, we're social writers, and use that as an excuse for.
It makes us sound better, doesn't it?
It does. But it's also, there's an element to which it's also inescapably true. I think crime fiction does hold up a mirror, some of it to what we don't want to see. But then, particularly in the UK and in places where things like the police procedural dominate so strongly, I think there is that element of being able to put the world back together again at the end of a story, which we also desperately want. We're all waiting for that moment when things are going to start snowballing in a good direction, and you can get that on the page. I think there are times when it's a storyteller's job to leave things unresolved. There's a time when it's our job to do anti-heroes and to kind of pull people down a little bit. There's also a time, myth exists for a reason. There's also a time, I think, when it is our job to offer a bit of escapism and to say to people, come here and we will show you a world that gets fixed. Or an issue that gets fixed, and I think crime fiction can do both, and that's, I would guess that's got to be a large reason for this upturn. Is that's what people want.
Historically, art and if we're calling crime fiction art, literature in general tends to follow these kind of social trends, doesn't it? It tends to kind of answer the problems that people have and the questions that people are asking. So I suppose it's nothing new in that respect.
Yeah, and I think we can see it in cinema, just in a different way. We're not here to talk about comic books, but I think a lot of people are cynical about the success of Marvel movies because they're owned by Disney, so it's we're all paying money to the man in a sense. But at the same time, if you look at it another way, we've kind of had a 10-year period now of the cinema and certainly the summers being dominated by stories about people doing the right thing and people trying to do the right thing and people trying to put the world back together again. And I think when we're a few years further down the line, once that genre has faded away and we look back on it the way we do on other genres after the fact, I think we might see that, it was a bubble in time when pop culture was actually crying out for stories about things being fixed.
And vice versa. 10, 15 years ago, when things were, looking back, although we always complained, looking back, things were actually fine. We had lots of kind of films about death and destruction. You had 28 Days Later. You had, they had films about whole cities being flooded underwater and the world ending, and about death and disease wiping out the population. These weren't fun films, but I suppose they were the yin to the yang of society at the time, which actually was doing quite well. Was pre-credit crunch. Everyone had some money. People were just kind of were quite happy floating along, and we needed the opposite of what was going on in society. We
needed some disaster porn, I think.
We've got enough of that in the real world now, so maybe this is why we want things to be fixed in fiction.
I guess that was the subtext of our culture, wasn't it? It was that when things are going well, there's always going to be a bit of you kind of thinking, right, which shoe's going to drop? What's going to go wrong? And so storytellers pick up that slack. And as you say, it's the yin or the yang. So with the other way now, I think there are a lot of storytellers who are picking up the slack in another way. I don't know about you, but I watch, so you've got the 60s and 70s conspiracy thriller, or the intrepid journalist. Yeah. You've got the way that story breaks down is in the last 5 minutes of the film, they find the one bit of proof that's needed, and they show that one bit of proof to the world, and everything's fixed. We then get a montage of everything being fixed. And I think in real life, we're kind of finding at the moment that doesn't happen. That one bit of proof means nothing. 2 bits of proof mean nothing. 5 bits of proof. There's no moment when we stand up with the one golden thing and go, aha, and everyone turns around and says, oh, right, let's fix things. So fiction is the way to fake that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've
I got dark then.
What we normally do on Partners in Crime, as you know, as a regular listener, Jay, is after the introduction, which currently stands at 22 minutes. We normally go into talking about what we've been reading and watching recently, which gives me a chance to have a little plug for Kobo as well. And this week I received a copy of Stephen Booth's new book, Fall Down Dead, which is the 18th Cooper and Fry novel. I don't know if you've read his or not.
I've read some of the early ones. Yeah.
For those who don't know, they're set in the Peak District, around sort of Derbyshire area in the middle of England, and they're fantastic. They're atmospheric. They're quite dark in places as well. But yeah, great books. Do check them out. I was amazed to see it's the 18th book. Which means he must have been writing them for nearly 20 years now, which is astonishing. And I was particularly excited because it was one of Stephen Booth's books, actually, that I was reading, which inspired me to write my first one 10 years ago. So a new one of his is always an exciting thing for me. And he actually sent me, the book's not even out till the middle of August, he sent me a signed, dedicated hardback, which I thought was absolutely lovely.
Oh, nice.
And I've started reading it. It's called Fall Down Dead, and it is superb. So I would highly recommend people pre-order that now. If you want to pre-order that, then do get it from Kobo. They are the sponsors of this podcast, very gratefully so. If you head over to kobo.com, find the book that you want to buy, and if it's your first purchase from Kobo, enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, and they'll give you 90% off. So yes, I've been reading that. I've also been watching the 3rd series of Unforgotten. I don't know if that's something that you watch, Jay.
No, tell me about it.
Oh, it's it's on. I think it's BBC, might be ITV. I think it's a BBC series. It's on the 3rd series. All the series stand alone. You don't need to worry about watching them in order. And it's a pair of detectives. I can't remember the lady's name, but the chap is Sanjeev Bhaskar. He's her second in command. And they essentially specialise in reopening cold cases. So a body will be found that's been buried for, could be 20, 30 years. Somebody who was killed back then, and they reopen the case as if it happened yesterday. So they go and they speak to the family. They have to try and uncover clues. A lot of the time they're trying to find out who the body was. So but it's fantastic. It's kind of the way it's structured is very much in that Broadchurch style, where you're being introduced to characters who seem to have nothing to do with what's going on. There might be an artist or whatever who's selling his portraits to a gallery, as there is in this series. There are various different characters. There's a doctor who's on trial for a medical negligence case, and you think, how are these people connected? It kind of flits between them all, and as the series kind of goes on, it draws them all in, and you realise how they're all actually connected to this case, and how any of them could be the killer, could be the suspect. And I quite like this kind of small town style series. Broadchurch did it in a very similar way. It's followed all these characters, and you thought, how are they connected? But yeah, I highly recommend that. It's on the third series now. It just seems to get better and better.
Nicola Walker is the name of the actor.
Have you been Googling?
Now that Well, I, as you were describing it, I remember I've seen the trailers, and the reason I know Nicola Walker's name, this is because I'm a geek, is that in the audio adventures of Doctor Who, she's one of the companions. So
okay.
Everyone else will say, she was in Spooks. She's been in a lot of great British TV, and I'm sat there going,
Doctor Who audio
companion in Doctor Who.
But it's a really great series. It should be available, I think, for everyone, wherever they're listening from. I think BBC Worldwide will certainly broadcast that. They should do anyway, because it's one of the biggest programmes on the BBC at the moment. That's if it is the BBC. It might be ITV. I don't know. I've not checked, but I've been watching it. I think it might be ITV, but it is cracking.
But it's 2018, man. Facts don't matter.
No, that's true. Fake news. Yeah. But if you can get hold of Unforgotten and watch that, then do. You can watch the third series. You don't need to worry about watching them in order. But that's basically what I've been up to. I don't have too much time to read and watch things, having young children and having to produce podcasts and all of this. So have you got anything that's been on your watch list that you would recommend, Jay?
Well, I've been going through a phase at the moment of watching a lot of old things. For some reason, I decided, I think it was the hot weather. I thought, I'm going to start doing summer blockbuster reading, and all that means is that I've been reading Jaws and Jurassic Park and a lot of these things that I read when I was a teenager, and then watching the films to see the changes, and to reflect on them, as 10 years down the road as a writer as well, and reflect on those changes. But it means I'm spectacularly out of the loop when it comes to TV, because anytime my TV is on, I've been watching an old film, probably from the 70s. And trailers for the Meg, the big shark film that's coming out, because I'm just so excited for a big shark film.
It's been a while since we've had one, hasn't it?
I know, but this has got Jason Statham versus a shark.
Oh, well, that's a fight I would pay to see. If that was on pay-per-view, I would buy that.
I was sold right there. I have been reading a bit. My friend Johnny Shaw, American author, has just had a new book come out called The Upper Hand, which is, Johnny Shaw is one of my favorite writers. He's funny. He's got heart. If a crime book has heart in there, I'm an easy sell, because I think we overlook heart sometimes in crime.
Is it still beating, because they are rare in crime?
Yes. Well, he had one book, and I won't say which one because spoilers. But he had one book that was revelatory to me when I first read it, because I got to the end and it had a really happy ending. There was the last couple of lines were really bright and optimistic, and it was I had to put the book down and think, wow, you can do that. Wow. So he's a really good author, and this book, as I said, it's called The Upper Hand. I might be talking out of school here. I know the original title. And I think we can get away with this on radio. It was originally called The Other Uckers.
Right, okay. To be honest, I don't think we have sworn on here, but there's nothing to say we can't.
I think that's a title that lets us just about get away with it.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, and the other thing which I've reread recently, I read it when it came out originally in hardback, and it's coming out in paperback now, so I'd had another look at it, is a book by my friend Eva Dolan, called This Is How It Ends. And Eva's, I go to an author like Johnny for the heart and for the humour, and Eva's where I'll go for the social fiction and the realism. And she's this is going to be the second time I've used the word ambition on this show. I'm going to start to sound like the next thing I'm going to do is say transcend the genre. But she's an author who, she's really got ambition on the page, and I'll always support that. And it was a fantastic book. It's about an activist, an old activist and a young activist, and there might, one of them could possibly be an undercover cop, maybe, possibly. But it's about, very, very relevant at the moment. I think it's about the ways that the different generations of activism can kind of butt up against each other and let each other down and compromise each other. And it's a fantastic read. It's really, really good.
Wow, that sounds great. I think if any of the listeners fancy getting that, I've got to get my 2 plugs in a show, so I'll do it now. Go over to kobo.com and find the book you're interested in. If it's your first purchase, enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, and the lovely folk at Kobo give you 90% off, and you can't beat that. Well, I think I'm just about done for this week. I'm absolutely sweltering here. The problem with recording stuff is you've got to have all the windows closed, all the doors closed in order to kind of soundproof things, and it is horrendously warm in here. So if you're done, so am I.
I think my room is actually not that bad. It's me that's the problem at the moment. I'm a little bucket of sweat. I'm going to be horrible to be around for the next 20 minutes until I get in the shower. The listener didn't really need to know that, did they?
I'm glad we're doing this remotely, because it does mean I don't have to smell you, Jay. But speaking of smelling things, I can almost smell Bob from here. He's going to be back next week. So Partners in Crime will be back to normal. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft.
Not the other one.
And produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.